Okay, so this is an introduction to Unity. So let's say you've never used it before. So I'll just walk through the steps. So let's say you will start by opening your Unity Hub, or if you open Unity, it normally brings you to Unity Hub as well. After that, you would hit New Project, and from here you choose whether you're gonna work in 2D or 3D. So in this case, I'm gonna work in 2D. Then you would name your project and choose your file location. Okay. So once you hit create project, this usually takes like a minute or two to load up all the assets. So I'm not gonna do that. I have already created a project, and it should look something like that. So this is how you will be typically greeted in Unity. Right, so here we have so our basic user interface. So we have our scene, we have our hierarchy. So you can see right now I just have my camera, and it appears in hierarchy here. So if I were to add more objects, they would also be listed in the hierarchy. I think for now let's just change the layout, because I think it is easier to work with 2x3 layout like this. And you can always change that at any time to any layout you like. It's good to even see what's available, because I think it depends on the project, on the game you're making. You might be working with different layouts. But what I like about this is that you have a scene here, and then you got your hierarchy here, so everything is listed in the scene here, so it's easy to find your objects. Then you can see what's happening on the game screen. So this is our game screen, and here's our project files. So for now I will just create just a basic sprite. So because I created my project in 2D, I'm able to create sprites, so all of these different shapes. So have square, circle, capsule, isometric diamond, and so on. I'll just create a square for now. So this will be added in my project. So now we have a new square sprite, right? So this is now available, and I can drag and drop that in to my scene, right? And this will, add this object to the scene, which then I can manipulate in different ways. So let's just go through that, right? So you can see this is my editing scene, so it appears here. I can select object either like this, or by directly selecting it, and you can see how it's represented in the game scene. So another thing is another important window is the inspector. So here's where you will be manipulating all of your game objects. So for example, let's start with our camera, and I will simply just change the background color. So this is always a good practice. I suggest, when you start working on your projects, just start with like dark gray, or like kind of like bright gray, like one of these colors. It's always a good start. I tend to start like this, and then then I'm gonna switch to my square, and my square has, you can see, it has a name. I can change the name if I want to. So let's just call it my square, just for the demonstration. And then it has a transform. So transform so transform matrix allows you to allows your object to be moved. It can also be rotated, and it can be scaled on 3 different axes, so X, Y, and Z. We're gonna go through this in a moment. And there's also, since this is a sprite, it has a transform, so it can be moved and rearranged, and it can also have some sort of artwork or color. So in this case I'm just gonna make it like orange, so it stands out. And any of these component menus, they can be folded just like that. So every time you see a little triangle in Unity, you can fold that. So here's the scene. So scene it already exists in the scene view. It's here. It's a bit in a different place, but it's a good practice to keep similar objects in different folders. And So what I'm gonna do now is just gonna go for basic UI here. So this is probably what you'll be using the most. So we have our pan tool. So if I click on that, I can move around my scene. If I scroll, I can zoom in and zoom out. Alternatively, I can achieve the same effect if I so if I right click and I drag and drop, it'll be the same thing, or if I middle click, so it will do the same thing. Then we got our move tool. So our move tool allows you to move your game object like this. So you can either select individual axis, so let's say this is my x-axis, and I can move it along like that, so up and down, left and right, or I can select this little plane here and I can move it like that. So you can see how when I select this object, so it has a position here, I can also set it here just like that, just by entering numbers. And if I were to move it, it would also change the values here. Another way of moving it is just clicking on one of the axis, like letters that represent axis. So for example, X, Y, Z, and you can just move it like that. So since this is a 2D project, we are only working with X and Y. So Z is also available, but you won't see much difference right now because the project is set up in, the camera is set up in orthographic view, so you won't see difference. But you are actually changing the object. So just to show you, if I switched from 2D view to 3D view like this, so you can see here's our camera frustum. So this is all of the things that can be rendered, and here is my so here's my square sprite, and if I were to move it like forward or back, it will actually move. But you can't really see much difference here because my camera is set up in orthographic projection. If I were to change that, so let's say I'll just change it to perspective, so then moving my square forward and back will actually make difference. But for now, I just want to work in like orthographic view. So typically 2D games are made using orthographic view, and I will change my scene view also to 2D like that. So this is just easier to work with. So then, so we have our, let's see what's going on. So we have our sprite here, so we can move it in 3 directions. We can then click on rotate tool, and we can rotate it, and it's also works in similar fashion where you can rotate it on z-axis like this, and the changes will appear here. You can also just set your values, let's say 45 degrees, and this will create a diamond basically. You can also rotate it on a y-axis and x-axis like that. Additionally, you can also change the scale. Again, it works in a very similar way. So this is I'm changing x scale and y scale. So notice, because this is a 2D object, I can't actually change that scale because that wouldn't make any difference. It's already a flat object. But if you have a 3D object, you will be able to change your Z scale. Okay, so we got that, and then also we have our so this is I call it sprite tool, or rect tool. So this is one way of like manipulating your object. So you can basically click on it and you can move it like that. You can select an edge, and you can change the scale. So I'm pressing Ctrl Z, by the way, to undo my actions. So Ctrl Z. You can also scale it like this, Ctrl Z. And if you kind of like click here diagonally, you can see the mouse changes, has a little spinner on the side. You can actually rotate it like this. And also have this tool, so I don't suggest you using it. It's basically move tool, rotate tool, and scale tool all in one. I don't know, I find it a bit confusing because you have all these different options available. It's better to just select exactly what you want to do and, you know, use that tool. So another thing, let's quickly go through shortcuts. So you can either select, you know, these tools like manually by clicking them and then selecting the object that you want to use. You could also press so Q, W, E, R, T, and you can select them like that. Okay. So this is, you know, purely depends on your workflow. If you want to use shortcuts, you can use shortcuts. So then we have our typical shortcuts of, you can, you know, take your object, you can press Control C and then Control V, and you can see another object appeared. I can just drag it out. I can press Control V again and it will create another object. Alternatively, I could press Control D to duplicate it, so this kind of like does this in one step. And yeah, important thing to notice is I'm just tapping D once, so I'm pressing Control D and this is done, because if I were to hold D, then I would just create a ton of objects, and yeah, we don't want that. Okay, so another thing that you can do is you can multi-select. So when you click on the object, let's say this, I'm going to duplicate it like that, and I can select two of them. I can press Control D and I could move them down like that. I could also select them here by either holding Control and selecting all the objects I want to select. I could also deselect them by, you know, while I'm still holding Control. You could also press on the first object and the last object and press Shift, select all of them like that, and then you could just duplicate them. Then I think another quite important feature is that you could double click on your object and you could select it like that. So let's say I was making some sort of, you know, platform environment where I had some objects here, and then I could maybe had some objects here and they were like green or something, and you can see they appear outside of my camera view because my camera can only see this much. So I could just focus on the objects like that, and let's say if I had like good naming convention, so let's select all of these guys and call them just move that, so I'm gonna call them green, or no, not green, orange square orange. Okay, and then I'll select the rest. Yeah, so these guys, and I'm gonna call them green square. Hit enter. So, you know, I could then select them by double clicking on the object, or alternatively you could also select it like that and press F to focus. I would say this is a bit more useful in 3D, but it's just good to know that. Right, so yeah, for now it will just be a good practice for you to just make some little shapes, to try, you know, see what shapes are available, like from here. So we've got our square, we've got our circle. We could also, you know, just duplicate it because this is an instance of an object, and we're just, you know, replicating it over and over again, just like that. So then you could try and find something else. So we've got a capsule. So it'll be a capsule, and this is really good for white boxing or just prototyping your basic environment. So for example, I could set up a little like game world. So this could be my player, this could be my platforms, and this is, you know, I'm not adding any physics yet. This is just purely how a game could potentially look, because I could already show the kind of challenge that can be expected. So here we go. Then maybe I could add some squares here. This could be my enemy, and I could change color to red, maybe give it rotation so it looks a bit more ominous, like that. Right, so these guys, you know, can be my enemies. So you can see I'm already creating something, right? Yeah, so that's how you would, you know, white box your level. But for now, I think good exercise is just to create different shapes, and after that try to make a little like a spiral-like shape. So I'm just gonna show you. So I'm using this sprite tool or rect tool. So I will create this, Control D, expand it, rotate it a bit, Control D, rotate it, expand it, Control D, rotate it, expand it. So you can see this kind of exercise just, you know, basically you're just making sure that you're used to like moving, rotating, and scaling your game objects. Because it might seem very simple, but it's actually a really good exercise to get used to the Unity UI. Like, so you could create a little spiral like that, and then maybe additionally have some sort of a, let's say, color transition, just so it looks more interesting. So that way you have used inspector and the scene itself. So you could, you know, maybe create something like that, and then yeah, once you're done with this, make sure you save your project. So either Control S or File, Save. And it's a good practice to be continuously saving your project. So just always press Control S or File, Save. And then yeah, once you do that, you could like close your project and go back to Unity Hub and reopen it, just to make sure that it works. Yeah, so give that a go.